There's a lot to be said about the WNBA entering a new era. A lot of people are making a lot of talk or engaged, if you will, in a lot of talk with regard to the Women's National Basketball Association and the $3.1 billion media rights deal. I've recently read a story that was written by ASVG Media, Africa Sports Venture Group, in which they monitor what transpires with the WNBA and the NBA. And one of my responses to the following, he said, the WNBA enters a new era with historic $3.1 billion media rights deal. And they go on to highlight that it is an 11-year contract that pays $281 million annually, a quote-unquote massive jump that is over 6 times higher than that league's previous deal. That it entered into the deal with entertainment giants on the board, including Disney, NBC, Universal, and Amazon, who will share in the broadcasting rights. So let me pause there. Here was my response. The NBA entered into a $76 billion media deal with Disney Prime, Amazon, and NBC Universal. 96% of the WNBA teams are owned by men. Many of those men are the same men who own NBA franchises. The highest paid athlete in the WNBA, despite the $3.1 billion deal, makes less than $1.5 million per year. The NBA rookies make $10 million per year. And post-CBA, the highest rookie for the first pick for the WNBA is $500,000. The rest of them still fall down between the $78,000 and the $215,000. So for the $3.1 billion deal, what does it mean? It means nothing for women in sports. Currently, less than 88% of women have sneaker deals in the WNBA. Aja Wilson did not even have a Nike signature shoe, despite being an Olympic medalist and a WNBA champion. The highest paid WNBA rookie per the new CBA for 2026 is only sitting at $500,000. Overall, there are more male coaches in women's sports than women. Women's sports have a very, very long road ahead of us. I say that respectfully because a lot of people are throwing out numbers, making it appear as though there has been such advancement in women's sports. There really hasn't. We do know that there's been recent expansions for teams to include Tempos out of Toronto, a team out of the Carolinas. And so we do know that there is an advancement in terms of that. But look who owns the new teams. These teams are owned by Maple Leaf, which is obviously the team that owns the Raptors, and they out of Toronto. You look who owns several other teams throughout the NBA, including the expansion teams, and they are all currently owned by individuals who currently own NBA teams, including, but not limited to, the upcoming Philadelphia 76ers. Both Josh Harris and David B. invested in a WNBA team that belongs to them. But respectfully, what happens is they throw out names like Venus, and they'll say, well, you know, tennis legend Venus is a part owner, or Serena, respectfully, is a part owner. But these are not part owners, and we need to be real careful about the language and the verbiage and how we present these narratives, particularly if we're attempting to make it appear as though women, particularly Black women, have a leg up in the game or have leverage. Then they have not leveled up. I had a recent conversation in which I had to check someone, with all due respect, about a misstatement of material fact that they themselves made as it pertains to the Kwanzaa Jones, asserting that Kwanzaa Jones is now a owner, if you will, respectfully, of the San Diego Padres, and she's not. That's not what has happened. What happened was she and her husband, Jose, respectfully, are part of an investment group. And that investment group are the ones who negotiated and have ultimately presented an offer subject to Major League Baseball's approval with regard to that deal. And so I say this with all due respect to Essence Magazine and a host of others who are creating narratives and an effort, respectfully, and rightfully so, to allow their readers and others to know what Black women are doing in this space. But the reality is, what exactly are we doing? What are we doing? The Kwanzaa Jones is not married to a Black man. She's not, respectfully. And so is that enough to hype her in terms of what she's doing as a quote unquote Black woman in this space? What is the narrative that is attempting to be written and displayed and conveyed to the future generation of Black women? Are we simply stating that as women we would have to marry outside of our race in an effort for us to have success stories like Kwanzaa Jones? Is that the statement, respectfully, that we are attempting to do? Are we basically asserting that that is what we would have to do in an effort for us to be recognized in this space? And I don't think that that is something that we want to be able to do. I don't think that's something that we want to be able to say. I don't think that is the narrative that we want to create. I think it's important that you love who you love. That's a separate conversation. But within the ambit of the narratives of Black women empowered and being empowered, whatever that means, whatever that looks like for most of you, it is the definition of that, the empowerment of Black women predicated upon them being in relationships with non-Black men in an effort to be able to say that that is the only way in which we thrive and survive. And so we want to be careful about how we present that. But going back to the reality and of the statement that I made, and it is a realistic statement, we need to be careful about trying to present Black women and Black men alike in spaces of dominance, in spaces of power, authority, and dominion, where we are misrepresenting material facts, albeit a milestone that Black men and women alike are leveraging their finances, their connections, their network to increase their net worth. And in doing so, they are partnering. And I think it's important that we emphasize that. It's important because most of us nowadays, with the way they have priced WNBA teams, a team that at the time, up until 2026, was paying their athletes high end at $78,000. Yet you were stating that these franchises were worth in the millions. Now, all of a sudden, the valuation for the WNBA has almost increased almost 100-fold. There was a time when you could purchase a WNBA team between $1 to $5 million, which was nominal. And now and that was when they were basically at the $20, $30, $40,000 a year mentality dating back 30 years ago. So when you look at them now at the 76,000 recent CBA, collective bargaining agreement of 2026, they were still now asking for almost $40 million. How? How could you say a team is valuated at $40 million when you have these 12 players and they're only making anywhere between $48,000 to $78,000? We're not talking about what they were being paid in terms of shoe deals and sponsorship and endorsing products and services. We're speaking about what the WNBA was responsible for paying them. And so I think it is important, even if I would look through the lens of antitrust, and whether or not the valuations that have now being placed on the WNBA teams is really a way to keep people out. And to control ownership. How all of a sudden are these teams worth $40 and $50 million? That's unconscionable. There's no way. There's just no way. And so wherein you look at someone who's writing articles and groups and venture capitalists that are now trying to tell us as women that this is the direction that we need to be looking in terms of our own investments, in terms of empowerment, I want us to be realistic and recognize that there is no empowerment based on the data I gave you. You're happy that the WNBA, after 30 years, I did say after 30 years, right? Has a $3.1 billion media rights deal. But the NBA is $76 billion with the exact same media sponsors, media partners, media affiliates. Disney, NBC Universal, which is Comcast, Xfinity, okay? Just to put that in perspective. And then Amazon Prime, right? And so how, therefore, do we assert that there's really an advancement if in 30 years, look at where we are? And so here's the argument. There aren't enough women supporting women's sports. Well, at Self-Serve Sports, we do promote and support women's sports. We have Fannikins, a unique brand of women's sports fans, not only fans, okay? A big difference, right? Okay. But are we, as women, as a gender, do we look at the agenda, or are we just focused on gender? Right? We see that even through a political lens. You know, when someone is running for president or vice president, we simply say, I'm more concerned with the agenda than the gender. And I think the same is true, respectfully, when we look through the lens of what is happening in the WNBA and in women's sports. In Canada, it's a very big thing with women in hockey, and even girls of color playing hockey. And so they have that. And so we now know that between hockey and soccer and basketball, are we as women, as a gender, as a group, are we supporting other women in sports? One of the hashtags for Seltzer Sports is play, do, go. And the reason why we say play, do, go is for those who play sports and enjoy that, those who do sporting activities but are not athletes, as it were, and those who go to sporting events. And that is how we hashtag our Fannikin events, play, do, go. So some of us might enjoy going to a WNBA All-Star game, or the U.S. Open for Wilmington for tennis, or the LPGA for golf. But there are others who do this leisurely. So those are they fall under the do, right? And then it's to go, to just make sports travel events, to curate those in a way that allows us as women to create a community, but we bring men in too, okay? And so when we think about these things through these different lenses, I think it's critically important for us as we have these conversations with the future generation of women, be it in broadcast, media, be it as future venture capitalists, be it as future investors. They're all one and the same? Not necessarily. There are some people who can invest, but they're not venture capitalists. And then through the lens of those who are going to school to attain an education in the spaces that would allow them to attain employment opportunities. What message are we giving to these women and men alike as it pertains to looking at what is really happening with women in sports? And are we as women, as a gender now, being played to look like we're advancing, when in fact, are we? We know that ESPN has done a wonderful job of switching some of their Major League Baseball and creating a space for women's sports to transpire during the summer months. And that started earlier this year. The announcements were made, and now we're being able to see how that unfolds. I would like to see a network like the We Network. I would like to see OWN Network and others actually maybe consider doing more in the space of providing for women's sports. I know USA Sports Network recently did their first doubleheader, and that was a great thing for them to be able to do. That was a wonderful thing to witness, that these particular networks are actually trying to build in this space. But listen, ladies, come a little closer. Okay, I'm going to say this. The majority of households in America are female-headed. Okay? Female as in the gender right now. Okay? So when we start asking about who is supporting us, are we supporting us? If 1 in 3 households in the United States are female-headed, particularly depending on which communities you look at, 67% in the African-American community, 54% now in the white community, and then those who don't identify or can say, I'm not black, I'm not white, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm not black, I'm not white, I'm Dominican, no mama, you ignorant, because you're going to have to identify with a race. Dominican and Puerto Ricans are not race of people. No, they're nationalities, okay? All right. That being said, let's move along. Okay, it's like saying I'm American, okay? So, okay, but what is your race? And so when we look at the race of people, respectfully, and we look at what is happening with women, female-headed households, that means that you are working, that means you're taking care of the children, that means you're the provider. It does not mean that you do not have a co-parenting relationship with the father of your children, okay? But for the purposes of the direction in which I'm trying to go here, if we as women are the head of the households and we as women are the providers of the households, and if that is the direction and the new creation that we have here in this place of the United States, if that is, and even in Canada, if that in fact, if that data is in fact correct, and it's coming from the U.S. Census data 2020 being the last that they have made available, that census are presented every decade, every 10 years, we'd have to wait another 4 years before we have new data. But if we look at that, and then we look at some other research that's been done, the Pew research and some other data that's out there, that gives us an understanding of where we are as a society, be it in Canada, be it in the United States. And I pulled Canada in for the purposes of us understanding it through the lens of women in sports and the new WNBA team that exists, that is part of the U.S. operation, respectfully. And so if we're going to ask this question of how or if or when women's sports fails, we would have no one to blame but ourselves. So this thing of, where are we going as women in sports? As not to sound contradictory, when I put the data out there, it was for corrective purposes, so that the narrative is not incorrect. But then when we recognize what the narrative is suggesting, $3.1 billion after 30 years compared to our males at $76 billion, who is watching the games? So mom and dads, the mothers in the home, if you're a female, single-headed household, or if you're a female and you're single and you're not married and there are no children, and you are able to use your resources accordingly, are you a season ticket holder for WNBA or women's sports franchise programs or services? Do you support women in sports? Are you volunteering? Are you donating to encourage other girls to participate in sports? Are you purchasing merchandise? Okay, so if you don't have anything at the gate and you're not a season ticket holder and you're not purchasing merch, that is something to be said. One of the things I would be encouraging the WNBA and their individual franchise teams to do is contact a lot of us who do this work and say, hey, would you wear our outfits? You do not see a lot of women wearing jerseys that represent, respectfully. Even when Allen Iverson showed up to watch Caitlin Clark play in Atlanta versus the Dream, he came in a Chicago Bulls jersey, Michael Jordan's jersey. He wasn't wearing a female WNBA jersey. So I think it would be important if I was in the space of the Dream or the Sky or Tempo or, New York Liberty, of course, the Fever, Indiana, I can't forget about Caitlin, if I were in their spaces and I was in their marketing, I would be reaching out to bloggers, podcasters, journalists, people in the corporate sector, and I would be saying, here's our attire. We would like for you to wear it for what you're doing. Let us not be confused about the number of followers that you think some of us have. For example, Celtics Sports, we don't rely on social media. We still use what we learned as an old school method, yes, but the persons who taught us, it worked for them and it works for us. We still do mail-in lists. We still use the United States mail. We still use phones and phone banks. We don't rely on social media. And a lot of that was a part of what transpired with the Dorsey-Elon Musk sale and that deal. And then our research on what happened with Warren Buffett when he invested in MySpace. And so a lot of people, you sit there and then you have these mergers and acquisitions and takeovers like, Meta with Instagram. And so you want to be careful when you build your platform on something you cannot control. Microsoft has a tendency, respectfully, Bill Gates products, that they're here one day and the next minute they're gone. They're doing a lot of pilot programming. For those of you write, and MSN has a platform now, and they would be probably like, the Yahoo and all the other platforms. They come and they go. And so when you're relying on anything you cannot control in this space, that means your list of contacts could disappear. And I share this when I speak to our future generation on NILs, name, image, and likeness, and the Gen Zs, and in regard to giving them gens. And if you haven't read that article or listened to that show and you have children out there, or you yourself need to know, that is something that you need to do. It's also an educational piece that I present for HBCUs, historical black colleges and universities. I say HBCU, how about choosing us, right? Respectfully. And so through that lens, as a way to educate them and tell them, don't rely on social media. You might have 1 million followers, but then we look at percentage. And you have 1 million followers, how many of them are bots? You have 1 million followers, how many of them are actually engaged, right? And so if you are relying on social media in an effort to present and sell the products of the WNBA, or if that's where your base starts and ends, well, good luck with that. How does that work out for you? I suggest a little bit of old school method. This is the way we learned it. And part of that is including, but it is not limited to, reaching out. If it's a cold call or a letter, or if you have to use your DMs for it, to say, yo, you doing a show? Why don't you go ahead and support our product? You travel with your girls? Why don't y'all go ahead and wear our products? There is not a push by the WNBA in terms of merch. Getting people to wear your merchandise, even your throwbacks from the days of Lisa Leslie. I know that Lisa, congratulations, is going. I'm looking forward to having a statue. She deserves it. So does Candace Parker. So does Audra Wilson. I'm just saying, right? Cheryl Swoops. I'm just saying, Rebecca Lobo. I'm just saying, Tarasi. Of course they do, right? But congratulations definitely goes out to you. We respect and appreciate who you've always been in this space of women in sports, but even her jerseys, so a throwback jersey that y'all can create. The men have it. So what exactly are you all doing with regard to marketing the individual franchises? Everybody was trying to build it on the Indiana Fever and build it around Caitlin. And we saw that with Fanatics. And so how did that end up working out at the end of the day, right? And so collectively speaking, imagine if the WNBA did that. I have never personally seen, and I like her, by the way, I've never seen, a lot of you know her, Taylor Rook, right? I've never seen Taylor in a WNBA jersey. It would be wonderful for you all to reach out to someone like her as well, to say, hey, if you're doing this, that, and the other, wear our jersey. Right? So you have a lot of women in these spaces, and they're not wearing your jersey. They're not wearing your attire. But I never saw Malika in it, or Ashley, And so are you all making contact with women in this space to say, wear our attire? Be it collectively through the WNBA or through the individual franchises, right? And notwithstanding that, are you inviting us to the games? To say, here, why don't you show up and then speak about what it is you're doing? What about media passes? I know on a larger scale for the ESPNs and the CBS, But I'm talking about what is the WNBA doing in terms of saying, I'm engaging with you ladies, and I want you ladies to come to our event. Yes, courtside, you're always talking about who's there from the NBA. And I think that's great too. I really do. But there are a lot of women in this space. And we are connected with sororities. Indeed, indeed. Yes, we are. 1908. Okay. Right? That's how we play. But you would prefer to have someone else there. And, that's fine. But they represent fraternities. And so if the ultimate goal is to get women to buy your merch, to get women to be in the games, I think the idea for most of you is you talk a good game about you want the advancement of women in sports, but you're sitting there with your tongues out, hoping for men to show up. Really? You don't see the men doing that in the NBA. They don't go out their way looking for women to be in the bleachers and the stands. No, they don't. The NFL has one of the best programs and services for women in sports to participate in terms of men-dominated sports, of the 4 professional sports. I definitely would say in the order of the NFL first. The next that has a very welcoming platform for women is Major League Baseball, and then the NBA, and then hockey. Hockey has been a family sport. And so that's been important too. Although it's a little rough, it's definitely a family-oriented sport. And so I would say they're tied neck and neck, in my opinion, in my research. I have that sociology background research. And so, yeah, I think they're neck and neck. But you don't see any of them going out their way, really pushing the envelope. The NFL did it, but in a unique way. They did this through the lens like hockey, of it being a family sport, bring the family out, family night. They know Super Bowl Sundays is family. It's after church, for those who go to church. It's, if you go to the synagogue, then, on Saturdays, okay, shalom, shalom. That being said, but for the most part, they built it around, Judeo-Christianity, and on a Sunday, and watch the games and enjoy it. And it used to be that you watched it after you saw Disney come on, and then the football game would come on, and families would sit and enjoy it. They build it around Mother's Day and Christmas and Thanksgiving. Although the NBA has made that attempt to do it, what are women in sports doing that allows for women to sit around the television and be willing to watch? That allow women on the next road trip to say, hey, we're going to take a road trip, and while we're there, we want to see the WNBA play. All right? That's not really happening. And so in an effort for us to be realistic about what's happening in women in sports, and an effort for us to create the right narrative, we need to be open, honest, and candid. And we need to be able to address our agenda. What is the agenda for advancing women in sports? And what women are you attempting to advance in sports? And is it really about gender? What is the hidden agenda? All right. Thank you for joining me today. This is Lisa Hampton. Love is selflessly authentic. Having all money, power, talent, opportunities now. Follow us on Lisa Hampton _ on X. We posted for one of the pin, and I take it up and we put it back down. But we didn't forget about Ron Ball, the Allen Iverson way, and we will have an episode in there dedicated to women in sports. His mother used to play basketball during her pregnancy. After her pregnancy, she continued to play basketball. She would bring Allen to the game. But we incorporate or intersect, respectfully, women in sports through that. Stories about Pearl Moore and a host of others, and how advanced the women in sports movement has been, be it Title IX. How advanced have we been over the last 30 years? And is this a momentum that will fall off once again, just as it did coming out of the 1990s, when the former late great Commissioner David J. Stearns allowed for us as women to have a platform through the WNBA? All right? So chime in. That video is posted. And yeah, I gave him an opportunity to tell his story. Respect, respect. But now we need to tell his story. Okay? Thank you.